Okay, welcome back, guys. I'm here with one of the best people in the space. I met him at a space with Lions NFT. And one of the things that captivated really that grabbed my attention to him was sort of the way he thinks about stuff, philosophical mind. He also has a dope project regarding reinscriptions. It's an experiment he's working on, which is amazing. We'll discuss that. But with that being said, Donny, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Hanging out in the basement of the restaurant because it's the only relatively quiet place. Wearing my nerd ear goggles right now.
I
Ready to
love the
roll.
setup. I honestly thought that was the setup. I really like it. I was gonna comment. I'm like, I really love your setup. It's so nice. Like the background and
Dude,
stuff, like
this
perfect.
yeah, it's not even this isn't set up. This is just the way the restaurant looks in the basement. So don't tell the state liquor authority though, because I'm not sure it's supposed to be that. Actually, why did I say that? You don't know where I am. What does it matter?
Yeah, no,
My
exactly.
favorite part about this setup though is that one, if it is noisy, this stupid boom mic, and I know it makes me look like a telemarketer, but it cuts out all of the outside noise. The mic quality is fantastic for
Yeah.
something that's Bluetooth. Like nothing really rivals this. Also, I can be talked
Wait, that's
come
so
back whenever I
good.
want to. I know it's crazy,
Wait,
right?
what?
Yeah.
Wait,
So I
I
love
didn't
this
even
thing.
know those. Wait, do you use that for Twitter Spaces too, or like
Yeah, I do. Everything
oh,
that's recorded, all like the Don't Say NFT podcast stuff, I've used this thing for
mhm.
because I've realized that the earbuds that I have are fine. They're just like any other earbuds, but like they don't cut out enough outside noise and the sound quality can't be good. But there's like 10 mics in this little boom down here, and I bought a pop filter and rubber banded it on. So like this is kind of the best possible setup for like being able to move around and
Yeah,
not have to sit in front of a microphone and always because I'm a pacer most
yeah,
of
I
the
love
time.
that. Huh.
So I got to be mobile, you know?
I do too. I can't stay in one spot. Like if I stay in one spot, like for a minute, I'm gonna start getting jittery. Start like moving around
Yeah,
all
it's
the
too
time.
much.
I'm gonna hit you up regarding that because I wanted one of those headsets. I definitely need one of those. It's
I'll send you
perfect.
the deets. It was only like 200 bucks, I think, something like that, maybe 180. It was pretty cheap.
Perfect. I definitely need one of those. Okay, so before I started recording, we were discussing philosophy. So like, just some context. So I was a philosophy minor, back in undergrad and stuff. And one of the best things I loved about it was sort of like, they teach you like not only how to think, but kind of how to think in a different perspective, in a different manner, and get to a solution to that problem, right? And I remember the first time I ran into was during a space with Little Nice NFT he hosted, and you were talking about reinscriptions, the RAG experiment, which we'll discuss. But when I heard you
Oh yeah.
speak, like you reminded me of my professor. So I'm like, this guy's amazing. Like I want to talk to him. But yeah, how'd you like get into like philosophy? I know you mentioned you were a philosophy major and stuff, and kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Dude, it's funny. I've been trying to figure out why I am the way I am or who I am for a long time. And I don't know if this is something we ever figure out really, but like you think you know sort of when you're a kid because you
Mhm.
know so little about what's going on and who you are that you think you've got it all figured out. I think that's called Dunning-Kruger syndrome or the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know because you realize like finding a house is one thing and you're like, I found it. I know everything about the house. And then you step inside the house and you're like, Jesus, there's a lot of rooms. I don't really know anything about the house. So like it stands true that the more you learn, the less you think you know because you realize the breadth of what can be known or sort of like as much as we can. So like as a kid, I was really into cars. I hit my head on the ground in the year 2000 and I lost the ability to form long-term memory. So I don't remember anything before the accident. I also don't remember anything after the accident. The only moment I know is now. And I recognize things like, you know how you can recognize a door,
Yeah.
even if it's a door you've never seen before, you know it's a door. Everything's like that to me. I don't know what my wife looks like until I see her. And so just like I know every door I'll ever see, I'll recognize them as doors. I know every Brianna I'll ever see, whether she changes her shirt or her hair. There's like a form of her that stores in my head as data, but I
Mhm.
can't conjure that as sensory perception. So I can't see anything in my head unless I'm looking at it right now, which is kind
Ah,
of confusing.
uh-huh.
And not that this is like, it's not a crippling, I don't know, disability or something, but it informs everything I do because I do things very differently than most people. Like I don't understand Christmas. I don't know anyone, even if they don't celebrate Christmas or they're not Christian, I don't know anyone who's confused about Christmas. It's
Mhm.
just accepted and done. And I can't do that because I don't have the context. I fundamentally can't store the context necessarily or necessary to understand, well, any holiday really. So anyway, back to why I got into philosophy. I was really into cars and I didn't know why I was into cars and I never really questioned it, but I wanted to build motors. I was just like super into the concept of the combustion engine and the two-stroke and four-stroke cycles that cylinders go through in order to like make something propel and how their stroke versus bore, basically the diameter of the cylinder versus the length of the throw, how that would translate into different kinds of power at different revolutions. like a semi truck can have way more power than a sport bike, but a sport bike goes way faster, right? And they're like, all of the math that goes into that was just like, it was almost like I found something within me that
Mhm.
already knew all that stuff and I got to exercise it somehow. So I started out in college in mechanical engineering and I realized that because I really wanted to build motors, I wanted to design engines for like BMW or something. And I realized over the course of the first 2 semesters that I hated it. And I hated differential equations. I hated calculus.
Mhm.
It's not that I hated calculus. I hated the way everything was taught. I don't like the way most things are displayed to people because they're shown by a person who's done this every day for so many years that they forget that every crowd they're talking to doesn't know everything else they've said. So like every teacher doesn't they can't possibly relate to the student anymore because they're so deep into the topic. Philosophy is not like that. Philosophy purports to know nothing.
Yeah.
It's the only subject where like even the professors are like, I know that these people thought these things. I don't know anything about it. So they always approach it from a standpoint, well, most of the time, approach it from the standpoint of zero knowledge, of not knowing what's going on, but always exploring it. And that just was better for my brain. So my first intro to philosophy class during my mechanical engineering beginnings, I was just like, if I'm getting an A in intro to philosophy and a C minus in all these mechanical engineering classes, clearly that's telling me something about where I should go. So I ended up with a major in philosophy with a minor. It's either a minor or like I had the credits but didn't achieve the actual minor in astronomy because that was my other excitement level. Because it's another one of those subjects where we really like we know that we know some things,
Yeah.
but we know that we don't know way more than we do know.
Mhm.
And that's just it's really satisfying. Despite being confusing, it's really satisfying to me. So that's how I ended up going through those 2 topics a whole bunch. And I think everything in my life, you're right. Everything in my life was informed not just by that brain injury that I incurred, but the level of critical thinking that we are trained to undergo
Yeah.
because of that. Um, I don't know, man. It's changed the way that I think. It's made me feel like an alien in a lot of ways because I don't just take things that are said and go like, "Yep, that's true." I overthink everything. And I'm probably infuriating to live with. And I
No.
don't know how my wife does it, to be honest.
I love that so
But
much.
that's yeah. There's a long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
No, no, you're fine. I was gonna say I love that because that's the kind of perspective. I think a lot of it comes, like for me, like growing up, I've always been a very curious person. I think that naturally, it's a good thing and a bad thing for me. In the sense that being curious, I always want to explore the answers and try to find them. Right, even something very minimal, something that you might not consider as like as important, but I'm just so curious, and that sort of drives me, right? So when I see like kind of critical thinking, when I see people asking questions and curiosity, and like by the way, this is Donny's Twitter account. We'll link this down below for anyone watching. One of the things I kind of like speaks to me is like critical thinker, and that's so important, so important, right? Like everyone talks about technical stuff in the space, especially on Ordinals, but like people don't think first like, hey, what's the potential for this? Where can we go? And what's the dangers of it too, right? What's some stuff that you can do? So like with that said, like what brought you to the Ordinal space, and why do you think this is different compared to other ones?
I got really into the idea of blockchain. My wife's ex-boyfriend got both of us into the concept of blockchain by
Mhm.
talking about XRP a whole bunch. And we didn't stay on the XRP train, but that was like, I think that's like everyone's entry is like XRP because we all get drawn into this thing that's essentially a high stakes casino with
Mhm.
very low input and the very high level potential reward, at least the way that people describe it. When you think of things mooning in the past and you hear stories of people making $20 million out of 20 bucks or whatever,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, I don't know, it's a no-brainer to just dump some amount of money that you can burn into it.
Mhm.
But as soon as I looked up what XRP was versus like any other company that existed outside of the blockchain world, and that it was like on a ledger, even if it's not a blockchain technically, or like a decentralized blockchain, the way that we think of them now, it opened up my mind to the concept of a digital ledger and what that can solve. So I ended up deep diving like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and thought I knew a lot of things at first because I just learned about it and I didn't realize how much I didn't know. And I dumped all kinds of money into 50 or 60 alts over the course of just before the last bull and rode them all the way up and then rode them all the way down and lost everything I put in. And that was my first big lesson. And as we were on our way back down, I was dumping money into Solana NFTs because the concept of an NFT was like I was a juvenile. I had a juvenile mindset about it. where I was like, this is the future of ownership. It's no one can take it from me and blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, I didn't realize that like something, even if it's on chain, it's only as immutable as the chain itself.
Yeah.
Because if the chain is a business, like a tech company, and not just a fundamental virus like Bitcoin is, it can go away, and it can go in 10 years or 1 year, tomorrow, or 100 years. But it's more likely that any other chain will go away than Bitcoin, which is what, after I was like licking my wounds from the Solana NFT world, and I was still a DGods holder at the time. I think I sold right before they moved to Ethereum, not because I was like upset by it or didn't want to go to Ethereum,
Mm.
but because I gained an interest in Ordinals. So I sold a DGod in order to put those funds into Ordinals, and just learned a bunch more lessons. I think I bought at a very low liquidity time for a bunch of like, I think this was around, I was buying things in like the 40K to 100K inscription number range.
That's a good range.
And I was just buying stuff I liked, What's that?
I was gonna say that's a really good range right there. That's a good range.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fun range. Like some of the early projects are still some of my favorites, even if they have no leadership and no community and no anything. I like that what was done when it was done. I think that's one of my favorite things about Ordinals. And I like that they're there no matter what. It's like they can't, even if the founder walks away or the artist decides to, dies. I don't know, like what artists die. That's what we all do. We all die, right? So if an artist like Picasso dies and his works become more valuable, let's say anybody from any Ethereum project dies and then they stop paying the server hosting fees and then all the images are no longer there, the art can't go up in value. And that's not to say that the only point of this is value, but if longevity and telling a story over the course of long periods of time, I think that's what art is about. Art is about transmitting the feeling of a time, including its context, as per the viewpoint of the creator over the course of long swaths of time. And that's why we find like Renaissance art so exciting, because it wasn't created now, and it couldn't really be created now because the context was so much different then. Or like Mondrian's art, him totally deconstructing the concept of art to just vertical and horizontal and the three primary colors plus black and white and gradients of that, black, white, and gray, essentially. That couldn't have happened any other time than it did. And if it did, it wouldn't mean the same thing as it does. So I think the fundamental thing I like about Ordinals is that it is locked in time when something happened. So the context is kind of like implied, and it can't go away if the person stops caring for it. Those two things I think are the most important part of this for me.
I love that so much, and I love the fact you mentioned context, especially with the Renaissance. Like earlier, like when we're talking about philosophy and stuff, and you mentioned, you pointed out like sort of perspectives, right? Like it is ever changing, especially as you grow older. Like if you ask me when I was a kid, what do I think of art, like a picture, a painting, right? I would just say it's a bunch of colors mixed together. If you ask a teenage me, I'll say it's a visual representation of something. If you ask me now, 20-year-old me, right, 20s older me and stuff like that, I would say, it evokes some form of feeling, right? And I'm pretty sure that's going to continue changing. But like your perspective is like, no, it's actually not only does it invoke feelings, but it also provides context for that period of time, right? So like the art, it's immutable, but it provides context for that period of time and everything that's going around us.
It's complicated storytelling that's subjective to the observer, and I don't think can exist without the observer. We did the 11th episode of Don't Say NFT was on art. The one prior to that was on provenance, and the one prior to that was on artifacts. So we did a lot of discussing of what an artifact is, and it turns out it's almost anything man-made at all. Anything made by something for a purpose out of materials like corn now, like monoculture corn is an artifact. It's no longer a naturally occurring item because we've sort of made it what it is. Same thing with pigs. Every dog and cat that you see is not naturally occurring. We made those occur by modifying cat, essentially. Like wild cats are now domesticated cats because we bred them selectively, right? So if everything is man-made, and provenance occurs when a journey is recorded, then art being man-made isn't kind of enough. Like art being made with intent isn't enough to make it art. It almost doesn't exist. It's kind of like hunger or love. It doesn't exist without the observer entirely. Like a piece of art, or maybe it's a two-way thing. I'm still trying to figure this out, and I don't think anybody's really like done a good job of binarily drawing a hard data-driven line between what is and isn't art. I don't think that really is possible. And if it is possible, we just haven't done it yet. But it seems to me that it would require the capturing of a moment with context and a statement, and an observer to see that and recognize it as such. Because without either one of those sides, you kind of don't have it. Like if you're just observing a tree,
Yeah.
that's not art until you take a picture of it or paint it and show it to someone else, right?
Mhm.
So I guess it has to do with both the genesis and the intake of that thing. I'm still working through it, man. I'm never going to get to the end of this.
No, I feel
Sorry if
you
that
too.
was unconcise.
No, and that's the thing about philosophy, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like the thought experiment. Like here's a thought too is what about AI art, right? What if AI started producing art on their own without any human input, right? Would that still be considered man-made art, right? And you
Well,
can make
can it do that even? Like, can it do
yeah.
that without input? Because the input it gets is what we give it, right? So then is it just kind of like a synthesizer that we've programmed to then sing a song? And is that not also art, you know?
Perfect experiment is the color, right? Where the girl she's in the room, if she's never experienced color, like she's never seen it, but she knows everything there is to know about color, right? It's until she
Right.
actually goes outside and sees it for the first time, right? And that's kind of like the quality effect, all that stuff. And it's
Yep.
kind of interesting to kind of point that out into the art because I think art has a very similar effect the first time you see it.
Right. It's like love. You can't define it. You love is what you have for something you love, and you don't know. You can say all kinds of data-driven points about what love might be,
Mhm.
but you don't really know what it is until you've fully experienced it.
And
You don't
I
even
think
know
that's
when you
probably
have fully.
and that's a really good point there too, Donnie. Is like the experience is as much as important as the visual representation of the art. That's what I'm kind of understanding now. In my 20s is like it evokes sort of feelings. I'm sure that's going to evolve and change to something else. But yeah, I definitely want to kind of shout out your podcast, or your Twitter space. Don't say NFTs is so good. Anyone who's like watching this, please check it out. I'll link this down below. But he hosts every single week he hosts a space, and actually let's just talk more about it. But like I joined one of your spaces and like I loved it so much. Like the thought process, everything was perfect.
The point of the whole thing, it is a podcast. 4 episodes are actually produced and on Spotify at the moment. It's under the Crypto Sapiens podcast network. So it's
Gotcha.
not on its own string and it doesn't have its own logo or anything. But if you search Don't Say NFT, they just come up with the Crypto Sapiens logo and like in a string of other podcasts under that network. Because it's like bootstrapped stuff and it costs a lot more to have your own string of podcasts. And like that really isn't the point. The point is just to like exercise a concept, and that concept is exploring digital assets like a 50,000 foot perspective
Mhm.
kind of view, starting with blockchain. What is blockchain? And moving on to ownership. Why is ownership? How does blockchain imply ownership? Moving on to identity. How does identity come from owning these things? How is reputation formed from identity? How
Mhm.
does community come out of reputation? And so on and so forth, all the way through art, which was the last episode before the finale, which is coming up this Monday. So as we record this, 2 days from now, it's going to be an interview between me, my wife, and my mother. It's not scheduled yet. I'm going to put out a tweet tomorrow about it. But my wife and mother listened to every episode of this and read all the articles that I wrote in accordance with them.
Mhm.
And they're normal people. They don't have any interest in blockchain typically. My wife has heard me talk about it a bunch. My mother knows I obsess over it, but that's kind of all they know. So we get to talk to two people from two very different generations. My wife is probably the youngest millennial you can be, and my mother is a boomer. Like a boomer is aged boomer.
Yeah.
So my wife is 28 or 29. My mom's like 73.
Mhm.
So these are two very different perspectives we're going to have on the viewpoint, I guess, both looking at this weird outside world where we have our own language, our own lingo, and we're all huddling around this thing we think is going to do something and will solve problems that they don't even know that they have yet. So we're in
Mhm.
this weird early adopter phase where like we're talking about ownership and they're talking about like how scary it is to lose insurance by
Mhm.
using a third party. And like we're both just kind of like doing our own thing and none of it has come together yet. So I'm really interested to hear what they have to say about what their hurdles are, what their hesitances are, or why they just don't care.
Yeah.
It's like I can talk to you about Magic the Gathering all I want, but it doesn't mean you're going to want to play it.
Yeah.
It might just be this like subset that is now another option. And I guess this was just to explore that. This was to say, what fundamentally are we trying to accomplish by using blockchain? And where is this going in the future
Mhm.
across every medium that we could possibly use it, including like art, reputation, community, individual expression of all sort, and how we interact with the finance world in some way. Anyway, we didn't really get into too many details about that, but the point was to get a holistic view of digital assets in current times. What's the point, right? What is the point? That was the point.
I like that.
The point is to find the point.
And that's a really good way to think about it too, because it's sort of the intersection of everything, right? It's the intersection of like the old way of doing things, the new way of doing things, right? And then you mix all this other stuff together with like, kind of law, right? Sort of the different groups coming into play, kind of wanting to like, you know, kind of mold it and sort of like the way they want to do stuff. And it was also interesting about this. I'm looking forward to this specific one too, is because like we get to see sort of two outsiders' perspective on this like kind of technology, on this innovative technology, right? Two people who might not
Dude, we
use
never
technology.
get that.
Exactly.
We never get that. We only talk to each other about this stuff because we're the only people who show up to talk about it is the people who are already interested. So to get two people who really aren't, and I'm just like kind of dragging them into it,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be pretty enlightening. Also, a little bit of an alpha point for the next, for when this happens on Monday. My mother is reading a sci-fi novel right now that is fun, and this is like totally unrelated. This was not planned. The book is about how the human race uses blockchain to solve like global warming issues and societal inequality issues. She came to me and was like, I'm reading a book about blockchain solving all these problems. And I was like, what are the odds that like after me obsessing over this for 4 straight years and you
Yeah.
just kind of like passively listening to me, you happen to pick up a book that shows how a utopia could be formed
Mhm.
using this kind of technology. And that's not to say that like a utopia is even possible. I
Yeah.
just thought it was really cool that she's bumping into this in her daily life
Mhm.
without me at all. That's showing some sort of progress.
That's literally destiny. I feel like that's in a way kind of, it's crazy, Donnie, when you're doing the right thing and it's almost esoteric. It's almost like you can't really put like a sentence to it, but like when you're doing the right thing, like the universe sort of aligns for you and like there's things that happen as a result of that, right? I know in physics there's like it's kind of is it the law of attraction, the law of something similar, but like that's interesting. And then the second point, yeah, go for it. Go for it, Donnie.
No, I was gonna say I don't really know what that's called, but I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then the second point I was gonna say is the bubble, right? I think you're right. Like we're within our bubble, so sometimes we forget. Okay, no, there's outsiders out there who don't know about like this technology, who don't know about this stuff. A very interesting point, right? So like right now we're like in a quote unquote like rare sat meta, right? So everyone's going crazy, and you think everyone knows about rare sats, but if you go outside of that, right, you'll realize wait, that's not the case. And a perfect example is like 2 weeks ago, I was in a conference at USC. It was hosted by Y3K. They hosted like this kind of speaker engagement, brought like different artists, different people into the space. And one of the speakers there was an actor, and he bought Bitcoin since 2014. He's been hoarding Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin. So right before like they were getting ready to talk, like the audience they were all standing up and they were talking to each other, and then he kind of like shouts and say, "Hey everyone, we're gonna start now. Let's all take a seat." And then to incentivize them to sit down, he's like, "I'll give you guys like free satoshis." And then I shouted out, "Is it rare? Is it at least is it a rare satoshi?" And he's like, "No, it's a satoshi." And he's like, "A satoshi, like it's the lowest denomination of Bitcoin." And I was like, wait, this guy doesn't know what like a rare Satoshi is even, right? And so like you're sometimes infused in that bubble, like you forget to think, oh wait, no, actually we're so early, we don't understand like
Yeah.
different perspectives, right? And so I think what you're doing is
This is even
important.
people who know about Bitcoin don't know.
Exactly.
Like they know and they have millions of Satoshi, or hundreds of millions, billions maybe, and they don't know. Maybe this dude has a wallet that's full of like money that's worth 10 to 50 times more than the money itself is actually worth. That's pretty wild.
And that's the thing too, is like, it's almost like what's crazy too about like, and this is where really philosophy gets into play, right? It's like there's stuff that you have, but you don't know you have, right? And you can even dig deeper. There's talents that you have, there's gifts that you have, but you don't have. And a lot of it comes like you first start to realize that when you first step out of your comfort zone and kind of try new things, which I think is the reason why I'm very curious. Like it's part of the process. It's kind of like leaving my comfort zone and exploring like the answer, getting to like the answer. And during that, and what counts more is also the journey, right? During that journey is where you learn like the bits and like pieces and stuff. And then towards the end, you kind of, you know, build that up and sort of gain that knowledge. But yeah, I think I definitely like what you're saying with that, and want to get your thoughts on that too, like the process of that.
The process of,
So like kind of like getting out of your comfort zone, kind of thinking outside
oh,
the box and
yeah,
arriving
dude.
to answers
I
and
don't
stuff.
have a comfort zone. That's the thing. I can't remember what I was doing. So like I have to this is a product of that brain damage. Every moment that I'm doing anything, I have to it's really exhausting actually. I have to reassess whether or not that thing is a valid thing I want to do. So I pivot really quickly. I make decisions insanely impulsively. And it's not because like I need to do something or I'm chasing dopamine. It's because if it's a good idea, I'm just going to do it. If it's not a good idea, I'm not going to do it. And that could be different 10 minutes from now. So it can be kind of destructive. Like when I ape into a whole bunch of altcoins in 2021, that is not a good idea, but it was the only idea, and I needed to do that at the time in order to learn why it wasn't the idea. So I don't have a comfort zone. I only have traditions insofar as I need to feed myself
Mhm,
or I get hungry. I need to go to the bathroom or I do it in the wrong place. And like those are the things I know,
mhm,
kind of like I know every version of my wife, even though I can't picture her. I just kind of have this like fundamental layer of things that I still have to figure out how to do every time I do them, but I know I have to do them. I just don't, I don't have, I don't have traditions. And it's really difficult to express how that is, but that's like when I realized that we're all doing this thing all the time, like we wake up and we buy NFTs or ordinals or whichever ecosystem you're in, or we buy Gucci bags or something like that. Like a normal person would buy a purse that's expensive, but very rarely does that person look at the purse and go, "Do I really want this, or am I just being told I want it, and I want it because everybody else seems to want it, and I can barely afford it?" Like,
mhm.
are those? Is it because I can't have it that I want it, or is it because I really want it? And if so, why do I want it? I can't help but ask those questions all the time. There's nothing I want that I just want because other people want it. I only want things because I want them because I don't know why. I don't have I don't have the context to know what other people want really. Like it just doesn't store in my head. So when we're buying NFTs and selling them, like I knew my reason for doing that.
Mhm,
And I had to fully explore that to screw it up and realize why I shouldn't buy some of them
mhm,
or why maybe my inclinations were incorrect at that point. So me getting out of my comfort zone is just me waking up every day because there is no comfort zone. It's always
mhm.
analytically deciding what to do and why. And all I can do is use the information I have to do that. And this is the point I've ended up at, which is where like it's the reason the podcast exists. It's Don't
Yeah,
Say NFT is called Don't Say NFT because it's a bad word now
yeah.
because we all kind of got burned and even the public took sides. They like turned it into a political party for a huge number of years. Not a huge, a blip in human history. A few years, people were like holding signs that said like God hates NFTs,
I
but most
remember
people
that.
didn't even know what NFTs were, right? So
Yeah,
like, why? Why do we hate this? Why do we love it? What's the deal? It's like Seinfeld, right? What's the deal with
yeah.
blockchain tech? What's the deal with digital assets? Why are we doing this? Why do we want to? Why should we not? And what are our goals such that they line up with this? And are we on the right track? Just trying to get an overview of it. So I don't have to get uncomfortable because I wake up uncomfortable every day of my life in a way that I don't know any other way. So it's exhausting and it's difficult to be and it's difficult to be around, I would bet, for a lot of people. I've been in a lot of long-term relationships that just couldn't kind of stand me, or
Mhm.
maybe I couldn't stand them because they were like, well, it's Christmas now. We do Christmas when Christmas happens. And I'm like, but why do we do Christmas?
Uh,
What's with the why do we dress up on Halloween? And people say, because we like dressing up on Halloween. And I say, no, you don't. Because if you liked it, you would do it on Tuesday. Every Tuesday, you would just do it because you like it so much. But you all wait till the same day to do it. Why are you doing this? It makes me insufferable. I live there, is the short answer. I live in no comfort zone.
I love that,
Does
and
that
that's.
make sense?
Oh yeah, go for it, Donny.
Yeah.
Sorry. I was gonna say. I
No, I
was
was
gonna.
just asking if that makes sense. And I think it makes sense, but I'm just coming up with this shit on the fly.
No, no, no. It's actually perfect because that's a perfect segue to like the next thing, which we'll discuss is kind of the experiment, the rat project experiment. But the idea is like when you experience stuff like like a perfect example you gave is like when you see your wife, when you see her like every single like once like the first hour, the second hour, do you learn a new fact about her or do you see her in a different light? Because it can be like the quality experience because you've seen her before, like so you can have that one. But like, is it sort of you learn a new detail about her? Yeah.
That's really difficult to. Okay, so imagine the commonality between all. I'm trying to find one item that's really easy to illustrate this with, and it's really difficult to do, but I guess we can just talk about the rat. Imagine every rat you've ever seen.
Mhm.
There we go. Imagine every rat you've ever seen in your head, and you can flip through the images of rat, right? I can't do that. So I only have what you see here on this screen, which is this like stick figure version of a rat that only has the bare minimum features that we consider rats to have
Mhm.
and no individual features of its own. The goal with, well, I'll get into the rat later. The point I'm trying to make is that every time I experience a new version of a rat, it adds to or modifies this base layer. So like if rats now, if they evolve to have shorter noses,
Uh-huh.
that form will change.
Okay.
But that's the only way that it happens for me. It's very like everything in my head is black and white, three-dimensional data.
Hmm.
None of it has any textures or colors or even features. And I can't imagine any of them. I don't know what my bedroom looks like. I don't know what my car looks like. I know details about it, but I couldn't visualize it. And I certainly couldn't draw it. So this is how this rat is a good explanation of how everything in my life is stored. My wife is one of those things. If I drew her, it would just be a bare minimum base layer set of things I know about her in the wrong scale and with no actual details. Um, so that's,
Okay.
yeah, I do. I do. The form of what I recognize my wife to be changes with the number of data points I get to add to it.
Hmm.
But none of those are like experiential items. They're just kind of like vague. Like if I see a new, like Tesla doors, it's a
Yeah.
new kind of door. So
Yeah.
now the form of door includes one more type, but I
Uh,
still don't know what any of them look like. I just recognize it when I see it.
gotcha.
I'm
Okay.
still digesting this, so I don't really know how to describe it, but I
Mhm.
think that's the best I can do at the moment.
It sounds like there was a is it the forms? It sounds like it's like when you have contact with the object, you know the object just by looking at it. And it's like you abstractly get like the knowledge, right, from somewhere, like it comes to you, but you have to see it.
Yeah, Plato and Aristotle did a lot of talking about this, and they have like very strange views about how like a form is separate from the item. I don't know if I would take it that far necessarily, but we all know that when we see a chair, we
Hmm.
don't think it's a table.
Hmm.
Even if the chair has no real differences other than potentially height from a table,
Hmm.
we know it's not a table. Whatever it is that chair is includes every instance of chair we've ever seen. But how do we visualize chair? It's really difficult to draw, to be honest, because it's not a two-dimensional or three-dimensional thing. It's an abstract concept. So this is my best attempt at displaying those abstract concepts on paper in Sharpie, you know?
I love that. And then so you started this experiment and people just ran off with it, right? So like I'll let you explain the idea behind it. And sort of re-inscriptions, but like I
Yeah.
saw this week. I'm like impressed and just amazed how far people took it. So incredible.
I think there actually might be one or two more on there since you've loaded that page. There was, oh yeah, dude, there's a few more after that, I believe.
I think we can.
Oh, because that's a screenshot, right?
It's a screenshot, yeah.
So check this out. If you copy the SAT number and go to ordinals.com, it'll
Okay.
show you all of the current ones. Not that it matters to do that necessarily, but if you go to ordinals.com, they will show you the entire thing when you input the SAT number. Um, the point of this was to exercise this inability to think of individual traits
Uh-huh.
in a way that coincided with a new technology or a new feature, I guess, of this. It may get angry with you about those commas that are in there, but
Oh,
it may
okay.
not. Let's see. I'm not really sure what it'll do. I think it yelled at me last time, but I could just be making that
Oh,
up.
invalid. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
it
You
gets
got
mad about
upset.
that.
You got pissed off.
It's not super important. There's only like four more inscriptions on it. I think there are like 27 reinscriptions for a total of 28.
Okay.
The point here was that since I can't, okay, so at work in this restaurant and another restaurant, I'm a beverage director for like four restaurants in upstate New York. When my wife was working for this same restaurant group, there was an exercise that was done at one of the other restaurants, just as like a part of, it wasn't official team building. It was just a bunch of people doing something. Um, the task was that everybody should draw themselves if they were a rat. So I got to see all these rats that were like, someone drew like a motorcycle riding, cigarette smoking rat, and somebody else was like a fairy princess rat. And their personalities really came out in detail in these rats. And I drew one and it just looked like that. That's the rat. The first rat you see there was mine. And everybody was like, why does yours look like nothing? Like zero, it looks like nothing at all. It's myself as a rat. The only thing I did here, which you can see, is
Yeah.
it's standing on 2 feet instead of on all fours. That's what I would be like if I was a rat. I would just be
Uh,
standing because that's what I do, right? So the the thought experiment came before the concept of reinscription because yeah, there they are. There's those last five. The concept was I started drawing that and I was like, what the hell's the matter with me? Like, why can't I can't draw something that has details? And I went into like why my brain does this. And I started drawing other things and was like, I think this might be an individual skill set that I have where artists draw from their experience in order to display something about how they see the world. I realized that I have a unique perspective because real artists that we see making art every day can't remember the things that they've experienced, and I can't remember anything I have experienced.
Mhm.
So the only thing I can draw is the form of something. And even if I look at something and try to copy it to another page,
Mhm.
as soon as I look away from the thing, my mind goes blank because I don't have the ability to carry that with me short or long term. So I can't draw specifics. I can only draw like concepts, sort of. So that was the whole point of this, was to make a series of concepts and utilize the this like new idea of a reinscription, of adding new inscriptions to a single sat or a single ordinal,
Mhm.
um, to see if we could make this inextricably time quantified linked bunch of art that necessarily never has to stop growing, but it
Yeah.
also doesn't have to keep growing. It can be, someone could send it to a burn wallet, people can trade it, they can auction it, they can sell it to each other, they can gift it from one art collective to another and just see what people want to put on it. And there are 69 different, I think there's going to be 70 actually. I think I'm going to make a zero number, so there will be a total of 70, even though the collection tops out at 69. Um, I want to see what people are inclined to do. And I've gotten 55 of them drawn, 50 of them inscribed, and I'm just working on finalizing the last 10 before I inscribe them.
Mhm.
And then I'll finalize the collection on Magic Eden and let people trade them as they see fit. And the point here is not to sell any of it, because I wouldn't call myself an artist,
Yeah.
although I don't know if I was an artist when I was a kid. You know, like I was a classically trained pianist and played with orchestras and competitively before the brain injury. And I couldn't play after it. So like, who knows what I was doing before that? My parents, I guess, would know, but I don't know what like, I don't have an experience of it.
Yeah.
So maybe I was an artist, or maybe I am an artist, but I guess, as we were talking earlier, that's going to be up to everybody else over the course of time.
Mhm.
um, all I know is I'm having a riot uncovering what it is I'm capable of doing, because I didn't even think I could barely write my own name,
Mhm.
let alone like draw something that isn't awful to look at. And I really think these are coming out cool. And even if they're
Yeah.
not coming out everyone's favorite thing, each of these forms is coming out like, if have you seen the whole group of them together,
I've
or some
seen.
of them anyway?
Yeah. So let me.
If you go back to the original sat on ord.io,
Okay.
or maybe just the inscription, not just the sat. Yeah,
Uh.
that.
Okay.
Or if you go to, no, not that one.
Wait. I think you.
There's, if you go to, shit, I can't even think of how to do this actually. If you end up in, oh, can you pull up Magic Eden?
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
Cool. So two things about this page actually. Um, First of all the reinscriptions are showing up as part of the collection, which is not desirable, and that's not what Magic Eden means to do. If you scroll down, eventually the interface won't look like this, but if you scroll down, there's one of these items that just says the word once on it, sort of like the beginning of a storybook, like a once upon a
Ah.
time. There it is. If you click on that one and then go to the owner wallet, the other 45 are in that wallet. So you'll be able to see the whole collection more or less. I know most of it. And it's coming out in a way that I didn't think it would. It has its own, I guess, consistent feel from item to item. So you can also view this wallet on ord.io, but this is just as effective. All of these pieces are base models of something that I'm excited to see what everyone else is inspired to put on them,
Mhm.
if anything. Like the
Ah.
money, that change thing, it just says change from a place, it's a small amount. The rug's a rug, the safe's a safe. The marker, like the Sharpie says marking
Yeah.
pen. It's just like a nondescript item. Sock, I don't know, maybe people inscribe like pictures of boxers or something, like people socking it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there are so many individual concepts that can be tied back to each of these because they're so non-specific.
Mhm.
They're like the concept of change, pocket change. The word change means so much more than just like a coin, right? So what are people going to be thinking of? Are they going to inscribe poetry about change or changing the world, or literally fungibility? Like somehow they're going to tie that. I don't know what anyone's going to do. And I want to see over the course of my entire lifetime, hopefully, what happens with this and where they all go.
I
You
love
know, so
that, and
that's the
that's
point of it, to
I
provide a
love that, and that's
platform.
like the perfect concept for this project. Is sort of like it's almost like the community takes it. Like you let the people decide what their thoughts are on that.
Right.
I know we've been going on for a couple of minutes now. So I'll ask you one final question, Donnie. And usually when I interview people, I like asking them for advice, sort of like any advice you have for the audience, any sort of like life advice, any sort of ordinal advice, stuff like that. So with that being said, like what advice would you give to people watching?
Okay, I guess there's two things. Try not to hurt people,
Mhm.
and don't worry about what anyone thinks of you.
I
And
love
I
that.
know that those two things are conflicting, and sometimes they are, I don't know, like that first part seems like, what is it? I guess maybe a better put is do no harm and take no shit. And by that, I mean, don't, like, if you're a person who's inclined to do things based on what other people may think of you,
Uh-huh.
don't worry about that, because nothing is worth redirecting your life because of someone else's preconceived notions about the way things ought to be. The word shouldn't exist. And there are no absolutes, including this one.
I like that. That's
But do no harm and take no shit is my favorite. Yeah.
Hey, I'm glad I recorded
Be
that.
who you
It's
are.
such good advice. I like, thanks for sharing that a lot. And thank you for sharing your journey too with us. I'm hoping the friend, hey, how's it going, sharing this, Wrong. He was outside. Here they go. That's Donnie. How you doing? What's up?
What's up? How you doing?
Yes. So I really appreciate like you like being with us, taking the time of your day and kind of sharing your story, the philosophical side of stuff, and as well as the project you're working on. And I appreciate everything, man. You're literally one of the best people in the space. And when I say this truly, like you have a really great mind. I think that's a gift, and truly like you're unraveling the gift as we go. But like it's a gift. It's a gift that very people have, and like you have that. So
That means a
100.
ton to hear. And I don't think that the attitude that I have is welcome in all spaces, except that in the Web3 space, there are no preconceived notions because we're building the ship as we're flying it. And I think that the way that I view the world is especially well tuned to that. So I'm glad it's coming across that way, and I'm glad it's welcome. And thanks, Fonzie. I appreciate
100%.
the time.
No, of course, I Let me know if you need anything, and then I'll catch you next time. Take
See you,
care.
dude.